Good afternoon and welcome everybody viewing this Public Works Committee meeting this afternoon. I'm Counselor Dutton, the chair for this particular meeting, and I would like to call this meeting to order. Number 2, Nestor Castaneda. Is it Castaneda? Castaneda, come on up. Just want to make sure I got that correct. Hi.
Hi.
Take a seat anywhere you're comfortable. This is the table for everyone. Alrighty, appointment to the Arts Commission of the City of Tulsa, an architect, replacing Scott Pollens. Term expires December 1st, 2026, CD Council District 5. Would you like to take this moment to tell us about yourself?
Sure. They were just like good at me, so. I'm Mr. Castaneda. I'm an architect out of GH2, so just down the street. I was born in Mexico and raised until I was 10 in Mexico, and then I moved to Tulsa. And then I grew up, I went to Union, so I grew up like in East Tulsa area. Then I went to Oklahoma State, graduated from there, and then I've been working for 9 years now. Same firms that been around this area.
That's wonderful. Whereabouts in Mexico?
Guadalajara.
Ah, the good spot, the
Yeah, I
vacation
really
spot.
enjoy it. Yeah, it's super nice to go back.
The margarita spot.
Enjoy the weather. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tequila's from there, so
Yeah, that's excellent.
it's pretty nice.
Yeah. Now we all have a connection. Counselor Bingle.
Give us some of your work.
So the one that you probably know right now is the Veterans Hospital.
Okay.
Down the street. That I'm working on 2 schools right now in Salina and Stillwell. Well, I did the expo stuff, so the stage was mine, which was really
Okay.
weird. And then the entries were also mine. And then the big barn, which is what I'm the most proud of, because I really like the barn.
Yeah.
The daylighting.
That's awesome.
And right now I'm just working on TCC. I just came from TCC, so my hair is a little messed up from the hard hat. But, so those are probably the biggest, the ones that you see.
Well, it's nice to
around here.
associate you with
Yeah.
things that we know here in Tulsa.
Yeah.
So thank you for being willing to serve.
That was a great question. Counselor Archie.
Yes. A pleasure to meet you, sir. I was gonna ask, what was the moment that you decided to serve on this committee, or what kind of motivated you to make the step to do this?
I think it was talking to a friend of mine who, because when I first got Dana contacted me, he was like, hey, why don't you
Okay.
to look at this. I was kind of like, well, I don't think that I fit. I don't have enough experience, or I don't think I'm a good fit. And then I talked to a friend of mine, and they're like, well, that's kind of what they're looking for, a different perspective from what everybody else has, which is like growing up in a different area or being born somewhere else. And so I was like, well, I guess that makes sense. So I was kind of like, yeah, I mean, I can totally bring a different perspective of that idea of just like where I grew up, how I grew up, and the kind of art that I'm into.
Yeah, I love that.
It's essential.
Utilizing your cultural lived experience with the architect of Mexico is pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
And then your experiences here as well, so appreciate that. Any other comments? Counselor Gilbert.
Thank
I have
you.
not met, but yes. I
Yeah.
do know.
But thank you so much for your willingness to serve on this commission. So we're bringing up the standard of service in District 5 on different committees, and I
Yeah.
greatly appreciate the citizens that stand up and do the work. Thank you.
All righty, we will be approving on July 16th at the City Council 5 o'clock PM meeting if you'd like to attend. All righty, thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
to the table.
Thank
Thank you
Appreciate
so
it.
much.
All right, we are moving on to item number 3, resolution authorizing payment of $30,000 to Oklahoma Watch Inc. and Whitney Bryan, plaintiffs, Dorner, Saunders, Daniel, and Anderson LLP, attorneys at law, from the sinking fund as a payment of a judgment and attorney fee award in case number CV 2022-2584, Oklahoma Watch Inc. and Whitney Bryan versus City of Tulsa et al. Emergency clause. Hi.
Good afternoon, counselors. Chad Becker from Treasury here as always to provide the assurance that there's a sufficient cash balance in the sinking fund to pay this judgment ahead of the levy placement on the tax rolls. The judgment has been approved by the court and the mayor, and with council's approval, finance will issue payment to the claimant and forward the necessary paperwork to the county and levy repayments to the sinking fund over a 3-year period. And as of today, sinking fund balance is $81.6 million. And then Hayes Martin from Legal is here to discuss the details of the case.
Hayes Martin, an assistant city attorney in the litigation division. This case arises out of an open records dispute from back in 2022. Ultimately, as the case progressed, we had a couple hearings on some discovery matters. Became clear that it looked like the city would prevail on, kind of one issue, plaintiffs might prevail on another issue, and one was kind of up in the air. So at that point, it was kind of determined it was in the best interest by both parties to seek a settlement to kind of resolve the case. So I negotiated with plaintiffs' counsel because they would bear attorney fees and reduce the amount of attorney fees kind of commensurate with what success I anticipated they might have. And that amount was $30,000.
Yes, Counselor
Did
Paul
you-
Harper.
I'm sorry if I missed it. Did you explain the circumstances of the case?
It had to do with a couple different types of law enforcement records. So there were several different claims in the case. One had to do with basically the manner in which trying to think the best way to word it. One had to do with police reports, one had to do with 911 call audio, and one had to do with whether or not someone had to be available at all times during business hours.
You talking about open records?
Yes.
So someone requested open records, and we were kind of giving them a hard time about it?
Well, that's not how I characterize it, but. Sure.
So Oklahoma Watch is the plaintiff. Okay.
Oklahoma Watch is the plaintiff. Whitney Bryan I think she's no longer an employee of Oklahoma Watch. She was at the time. But basically, there was a disagreement on whether or not the law enforcement records that were requested were in fact open records. There's a kind of a bigger calculation that goes in that, but I can't really get into without getting into like attorney-client privilege, confidential work product conversations.
All righty. Counselor Dr. Wright.
Thank you. So rather than take this to through litigation, there was just the settlement agreed upon?
Yes.
Is Oklahoma Watch getting the records they requested?
They received, basically as a result of the hearing, they were given one of the records for one of the 3 claims, basically. Which would be the one that I would anticipate they would prevail on based on what the judge's ruling was.
Okay.
But they weren't given the records that the city felt that we would prevail on.
Where can we read the facts of the case? Is there like a OSCN or something that could be sent to us?
Yeah, like in the minute, or if you look at the agenda, it has the case number for OCN, the CV 2022
Yeah.
2584. That would have the filings in the case.
So we can go look at all of them?
Yes.
There won't be anything redacted?
No, not in that.
And if you're interested in more, we can either hold an executive session or.
Yeah, I
just
want
talk
to
you
understand the 911
Mm-hmm.
call piece. So maybe that does need to be an executive session, but I'd like to request that at some point.
I'd like
Thank
to
you.
understand the other 2 as well.
Me too.
All righty, any further comments, questions, considerations? Nope. All right, gentlemen. We get to keep you at the table, don't we, Chad? All right. Number 4, resolution authorizing payment of $375,000 to Michael Delaney, plaintiff, Smolin and Reutman, attorneys at law, from the sinking fund as a payment of a judgment and attorney fee award in case number 21 CV 544. Michael Delaney versus City of Tulsa et al. Emergency clause.
My portion is the same, and we have Lawson Vaughn joining us to discuss the case.
Good afternoon, Lawson Vaughn Litigation Division. This case came from an officer-involved shooting. This was a shooting that happened in connection with a traffic stop, and it was determined that the shooting was outside of policy, and the plaintiff, Mr. Delaney, was shot in the left shoulder as he was fleeing the scene, and he was subsequently apprehended. He brought suit for violation of his Fourth Amendment rights and negligence against the officer and against the city. And we filed motions for summary judgment as far as him being outside of policy, that our policy was not the driving force behind the officer's actions. We also argued that he was outside the course and scope of employment at the time of the shooting because he was exceeding his authority as a police officer. The motions were overruled. The officer was not given qualified immunity either. And so we ultimately attended a mediation and negotiated a settlement in the amount of $375,000.
Okay. That was in 2021?
This occurred, yes, March 21st of 2020.
Oh, 2020, March, okay, that's what the 21 is for. Okay, is that also online?
So, yeah, I have a question.
Okay, Counselor Dr. Wright?
I don't mean to interrupt you.
No, I just wondered
When
if
we
that's.
have these come before us, I ask this every time, could the backup documents not have the OSCN PDFs added? I know we can go look them up, but not everyone in the public knows how to do that. I don't know if everyone at this table knows how to do that. We've had a question about how do I even find backup documents at this table, so.
So the record in these cases can be extensive. Do you want the petition? Do you want the most recent filing? Do you?
I think we need to have, what we're provided is like the end of the rainbow dollars and cents, which is what we have to decide on. 375, since I've been at this table doing settlements, is on the higher side of what we've done since I've been on since 2019. Just trying to understand the facts of the case a little bit more. I'm hearing there wasn't qualified immunity. Like, why is that?
So we're glad to provide that, but just to clarify, you're not deciding whether to accept the settlement. That has
No,
already
I
been
know.
decided. You're determining that there is sufficient funding in the sinking fund to pay the judgment
Yes.
from that. So
And then if you vote yes or no, you have people ask you all of the questions that I just surfaced here, and I need to have the information to be able to competently speak of it. Because if somebody says, is 375 high or low, I can only go on the other decisions I made at this table. I just think it would be helpful so that we can read ahead all of these things. I know there's certain things that maybe attorney-client privilege or other cases that might spin off that we can't always talk about, but some of the things I just heard Mr. Bond say is cause for pause. I have not heard those things said in these other cases over time. Is this officer no longer with the TPD?
He is no longer with TPD. He was terminated after this occurred. The Deadly Force Review Board reviewed the facts of the incident, found it outside of policy, and terminated his employment. He also, there was a grand jury that indicted him on a charge of reckless use of a firearm, which he pled no contest to.
Are there other cases related to this incident still pending?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
What, based on your description,
Yes.
was he off duty?
No, he was on duty. He was, it was a check subject call. There was a vehicle, this was, occurred about 1:15 a.m. He was in a in an SUV pulling a trailer and was asleep behind the wheel or of a vehicle that was running. And 3 officers arrived and to check on him, and he had a gun with him, and it just kind of escalated.
Okay, Sarah?
Oh, just a procedural thing. So for the backup documents, there's, and this is just for public who's not familiar with this, but there's several documents in all of those cases, many of which I don't think would actually be helpful in determining what the facts are of a case. So even if we put the petition in there, there could be subsequent amended petitions or summary judgment motions or all these things that I think would potentially result in hundreds of pages for you to go through. Would just the settlement summary, there's usually a
Yes.
settlement summary, I think that actually
I
maybe
think the
gets
ones
more
where there's like
what
a
you're looking
narrative that's
for.
like on the night of this date, this is
Yeah.
the facts of the case, or just link to OSCN, I don't know if that is sufficient, and then people can poke around
can
all of
poke
it.
around.
Yeah, but,
No,
right, yeah,
number, that would.
but at least that final summary that leads to the final decision.
Yeah, so that would be something that legal like produces internally, that's the summary I'm talking about. Okay.
All right, any further questions, comments, discussion?
And not to complicate it too much more, but OSCN is for state cases.
Right, that's
I
the
know the
other-
federal ones, we
This is
never
a
get
federal
to.
case,
I
which
know.
is on PACER, which is a
That's
different,
true.
it's a little more difficult to find.
Well, and also municipal ones we can't look at either, but
Yeah.
the settlements for federal cases, this is where we get into somebody from your office reading to us the facts of the case, or waiting for one of us to ask a question. And if we could just have that, it's public record, it's just not easily available to us, right?
The settlement summary isn't necessarily sometimes a public record. That's like city legal producing a summary of the
The
case.
court documents that are filed, no?
The settlement summary that a court would do is the court would say, I approve this settlement in this amount. It wouldn't,
Yeah, what
it
is
wouldn't
the document
necessarily
where they
have the
lay out the
facts.
facts of the case? On this day and time, this person was sitting
The
in a car.
allegations are either in the complaint or the petition.
Yeah.
But that's just the initial allegations against the city. There's several subsequent documents
Mm-hmm.
after that may take out those claims, or those claims are amended. That's what I'm saying, that ultimately can result in hundreds of pages. So that's why I was trying to find a condensed thing that actually gives you a summary of
What
that.
is the thing that city legal prepares to come sit before us and
That,
give
that's
us a
what
little bulleted?
That's what I'm
walkthrough?
talking about, is that internal document. That won't be on OSCN
Okay.
or PACER.
I mean, it could be something that's specifically prepared for the council. One page, a one sheet, just
Yeah.
time, place, what happened, officer was terminated because it was outside the scope and duty of their, just so we have it, so we're not just stuck here on this agenda item after rushing back from lunch or whatever. It just comes up a lot, and every time it does, I make this request.
Right, the incident, basically.
Yeah, just
and
a
the
one
outcome.
page.
Yep, yeah.
Especially when it's settlements.
Yeah.
We could say settlements over $100,000, whatever, so it's
Well,
not
it would be
burdensome, but it makes it,
a good tracking device too.
well,
To be able
I mean,
to
the sinking
see
fund
what's
reports are
happening.
published for anyone who wants to go and look, but I just struggle. in
Maybe
these-
at the top of that summary, we could write, like, this is the council's, just so the public knows.
Yeah.
The council,
Guide
by
sheet.
state law, is having to determine if there is enough and sufficient funds for this to come out of the settlement fund. That's actually what the council's decision is. Here's background information
Yeah.
on it, but that might help in communicating to the public what you're actually deciding on the case.
Great.
Okay, any further comments, discussion? Okay, all right, we get you one more time. Agenda item 5, resolution authorizing payment of $700,000 to Sheila Buck, plaintiffs Mullen and Freutman, attorneys at law, from the sinking fund as a payment of judgment and attorney fee award in case number 21-CV-295 Sheila Buck versus City of Tulsa et al. Emergency clause. Hi.
Hi, I'm Michelle McGrew from City Legal, from litigation, and
Some of you may remember this case. Sheila Buck was arrested at the Trump rally on June 20th, 2020. She filed a complaint saying that her First Amendment rights were violated because she was wearing a shirt that she said she was going to wear to a later event that says, "I can't breathe." This was right after the George Floyd and all the issues that arose from that murder. She was arrested for obstruction of a police officer because he gave her a lawful order to leave, and she refused. And we've been through multiple rounds of settlement conferences and mediations, but on April 23rd, we had another settlement conference, and the mayor authorized, and we got them to settle for $700,000. And this is a case like a lot of 1983 civil rights cases where the threat to the city is not so much the damages of the plaintiff, but the risk of attorney's fees that are generated by the plaintiff's attorneys. Because in this case that has gone on for years, they're gonna ask the court to award, $500,000 to $1 million in attorney's fees. So as to kind of buy down the risk, we got both sides agreed and settled for $700,000. The mayor's already approved that, and that's where we are.
Well, we just kind of passed on $1 million out of that sinking fund, so the balance, is it still 81.6 million after all this?
These judgments have not been paid out.
Oh,
yet.
okay.
So
So we'll be subtracting.
yes.
All right.
But we also
There's
received.
enough money there to do it, which is what we're deciding on our agenda.
Right. Right, well, I mean, I'm just, sorry,
Michelle,
Counselor
can you
Payne.
remind us what the original
We're just looking in the
ask
bank
was
account
last
to see
time?
the dollars are there.
What the original
Yeah, previously.
settlement demand was?
Yeah.
It was one that required a executive session.
Well, that was the one that the previous mayor had agreed to and brought to the council for approval because it was over $1 million. So by charter, that required council approval.
But we didn't agree to it, it split on a vote.
Right.
Okay.
You were in those discussions, Counselor.
But
I know, but I couldn't remember.
They were in
what the
executive
number was.
session,
I
so
was
we can't
trying
talk
to-
about
I
it.
know, but I was trying to remember.
But we can check and see if there's enough money in the account to pay
We
700.
obviously do. Chad's
Yeah.
already verified.
Yep.
All righty, any further comments, questions, discussions? Thanks, guys, appreciate you. All right, moving on to item number 6, ordinance closing a utility easement requested by Jamie Skipper, Wallace Design, on behalf of Tulsa Technology Center for property located at 3720 South Memorial Drive, Tulsa Technology Center, Limwood Campus subdivisions, for future expansion, Council District 5. Who do we have? Oh, hi.
Good afternoon, Appleton Public Works. As you've just read, Counselor, we have received a request to close a utility easement at the Tulsa Tech campus at 37th and Memorial. This request has been reviewed by utility companies and boards and authorities with no objections, and we'd recommend that you approve this closure.
All right, any discussion, questions? Oop, looks like you're getting off easy.
Run while you can.
Oh, I can't, I have one more.
Yeah, you're still here for one more, number 7. Okay, item agenda 7, license agreement between the City of Tulsa and Richard W. Poplin and Helen S. Washachuk for property located at 1581 East 22nd Street, Terwilliger, Terrace, Resub, L1-3, 1821 B1, Terwilliger Heights Edition for installation and maintenance of a colored stained decorative concrete driveway and decorative rock curb within the street right-of-way. Council District 4.
Yes, so at this location, a utility company had gone through and done some improvements in the front yard, and while doing so, they had removed the approach to this property's driveway along with a portion of the curb. And so there was a decorative driveway or decorative cement driveway there along with rock or block curb on top of our curb. And so they made application to place that back, and it has been reviewed by various authorities, boards, and commissions with no objections, and we would recommend you approve this license. or
All right.
this license permit.
Any questions? Nope. All right. we're dismissed there. Appreciate you. All right, moving on to item number 8, discussion and update with representatives from City Administration and Housing Solutions regarding the 2025 point-in-time count results. Other than discussion, no action will be taken. All righty, our housing crew, come on up.
Do you want to do
Okay, here you go. Okay, great, thank you.
Hi, Emily.
Hello, good
Mark.
to see everyone. Okay. Oh, look at me, I'm already stealing your pens here, is there?
You got it?
Yes, thank you. All right, I know our time is limited, and, but thank you for having me here, and glad to be here with Emily to talk about the 2025 point-in-time count. So, just to get started, what is the point-in-time count? I know many of you have seen the news reports, or we've done these presentations before, but just to reiterate, point-in-time count is a count and survey of every individual in our community experiencing homelessness. So that includes people who are in emergency shelter, transitional housing, safe haven programs, as well as a street-wide, city and county-wide canvassing of every individual who's experiencing homelessness in our community. This is a HUD requirement for federal dollars related to homelessness. Every community across the country does these, submits the results up to HUD, and then HUD compiles those results and submits them to Congress. That's why it takes us until June to be able to announce this, because we have to meet HUD requirements. And then the total amounts for the nation usually are reported to Congress in December of the following year. So we did our count here on January 23rd of 2025, so that is the night in question when we are asking folks where they slept. And so on the night of January 23rd, there's a count of every individual who's in a homeless emergency shelter bed, as well as over the course of the next day and a half, street canvassing of every part of the city and the county to count and survey individuals experiencing homelessness. We identified 1,449 individuals who were experiencing homelessness on the night of January 23rd. I do want to clarify, this doesn't include folks who are living in hotels, who are doubled up, or couch surfing. That's not part of our count. HUD regulates who specifically we need to count. This represents about a 4% increase in the number of individuals counted on the same night as in 2024, which is not as significant in the growth that we saw in 2023, but does still represent a trend of rising homelessness in our community. What we blacked out here is an important point to note, is that we've started to see consistent growth in homelessness in our community since additional federal stimulus dollars through the COVID CARES program ended, which allowed for greater homeless prevention programs, eviction prevention programs, and rehousing programs. Those ended primarily at the end of 2022, and we've seen subsequent rises in homelessness since then. I added this slide to really show the relationship between the point-in-time count results and how many people are placed from shelter or street homelessness back into housing by homeless service providers across our community. So Way Home for Tulsa has more than 60 agencies that are serving people experiencing homelessness. The vast majority of those organizations, if they're providing direct services, use the same data system, HMIS, so we count every individual that goes from shelter or street back into housing. So the numbers here reflect the point-in-time count for January of the given year. The number in green is the total number of individuals placed into housing for the calendar year beforehand. So in 2023, January 2023, we counted 1,134 individuals. So for the entirety of the year of 2022, which would have ended just a few weeks before, we placed 1,061 people into housing. And so you see, when we were housing about 1,000 to 1,100 people a year, we were relatively maintaining a steady state of the number of people experiencing homelessness. We saw a sharp decline, though, over the calendar year of people placed into housing 2023. And again, a number of about 778 individuals who were placed into housing across calendar year 2024. And you can see that our numbers in the point-in-time count are continuing to rise. So there are many reasons why people can fall into homelessness, and there's many challenges to get out of it, but there's a real close correlation between our ability to help people re-enter housing and the number of people who are on streets or shelter. we have an inflow-outflow challenge, and we are not getting people into housing fast enough as compared to those people who are falling into homelessness. So this is a geographic representation of where the count occurred. So this is where surveys were conducted. As you can see, there's a concentration downtown. That's where we have some of our largest emergency shelter providers. But street outreach teams and volunteers truly covered every part of our community, going all the way up to Skiatook, as far down south as the county line. And our service area actually does include Sepulpa as well. It's a HUD requirement that we cover those areas. So you can see that there's been a trend over time that homelessness is not just concentrated in downtown Tulsa. We see more people as we move east and as we move south, and certainly along west in areas like the Levee, that homelessness is really in every part of our community. So this is the locations. We had 812 individuals who were in an emergency shelter, 496 who were in a place not meant for human habitation, an encampment, sleeping outdoors, sleeping in a vehicle, 133 individuals who were in transitional housing, and 8 individuals who were in safe haven. The one point I want to really emphasize here is that 151 of the emergency shelter beds that were available on this night of January 23rd were cold weather emergency overflow beds. So those are not beds that would be available today. Those were people who were in expanded spaces at the Tulsa Day Center, Salvation Army, John 3:16, but frankly, people sleeping in hallways and chapels and offices because it was so severely cold. But that's not something, it's not capacity that we have on a given day. So when we think about how many people who are likely to be unsheltered today, we do have to take into account that we don't typically have 812 shelter beds. We typically have closer to 600 shelter beds available.
And Mark, just that, I think that number in the overflow indicates that when space is opened, people want it and take advantage of the availability of it.
Absolutely. So just to recall February when we had temperatures getting below -15 degrees and we were able to open up additional shelter at Rose Bowl and Tulsa Dream Center West. Across that week in February, we had 1,450 unique individuals who were using those shelters. So nearly everyone that we would expect to be homeless in a given night in Tulsa was in a shelter during that week when we had more than 600 additional beds available. So changes from 2024, there's going to be a couple here that I'll give a caveat. The increase for veterans number of +6%, veterans represent such a small percentage of our population that even an increase of 5 veterans experiencing homelessness will statistically look large, but it's not a huge number, though we still have more than 100 veterans experiencing homelessness on a given night in our community. Shelter count obviously went up. I've already explained the unsheltered count. One of the biggest concerns here is the chronic homeless number increasing by 19%. This is really a representation of people who have been homeless for a year or longer and have a documented disability. It's not a representation of new people coming into our community or new people becoming homeless who are chronically homeless. It's people who have been homeless for a year or 2 years or longer, are developing disabilities, and so we're seeing that need is growing. The severity, the impact of homelessness is becoming more prominent. The other one here, which it sounds bad, but it's actually a cause for some positive news, is the increase in youth by 18%. We actually have expanded services in the last year for youth and young adults 18 to 24 significantly through additional federal funds through a youth homeless demonstration project. So more youth were counted this past year because there was more transitional housing and emergency shelters specific for youth. We didn't really actually see an increase in the unsheltered count. So there's more facilities are available. These youth-specific programs are one of the few that are available for young people who are couch surfing or unstably housed, because we know that's such a critical point in a young person being sustainable long-term. So we're actually serving more youth and young adults than we ever have before. We actually helped 100 more youth and young adults re-enter housing last year than we had in the previous year. So just some of the high-level subpopulations.
Just ask you one question about that, Paul, because I'll forget it if I don't ask now. Are we just behind on shelters? I mean, Was homelessness just happening in other places before it started happening elsewhere? And so we're catching up on the shelter things where others were maybe impacted by homelessness earlier and they reacted similar to the way that we're reacting? Are we in, is our cycle in Tulsa similar to cycles in other places?
Absolutely. So what I would look at is, Housing Solutions released the Tulsa Housing Study back in March of 2023. We looked at, in that study, effective market rents across the Tulsa area. We looked back from 2018 to 2023. So just this past May, I went back and looked at that number again to see from 2018 to 2025, how much has effective market rates increased. Rent has increased on average across Tulsa by more than 40%. At that time, and this is across all units, all household types, so this is everything. This is the average, and this is not just the city of Tulsa, it's the market area, which is important. The amount that you would expect to pay on average in rent was a little over $700 at the time. Now the effective market rent for our housing market is about $1,040.
What's wrong?
So supply and demand, it's really a supply.
Well, and then we need more housing, right? I mean, it's more supply, well, more, yeah.
More demand, less
Can
supply.
we go ahead and finish the presentation and then?
Yeah.
Okay.
So when we talk about affordable housing, other communities, right?
Can
have
we
got-
finish the answer to the question?
Yeah. I can be brief because,
Yeah, you're-
and some of the other slides, but, so other communities have seen their housing markets get more expensive before Tulsa did, right? Austin started seeing this a little bit before Tulsa did. California's been seeing rising unaffordability for a long time. The challenge at Tulsa happens is that happened in a short period of time. It's really happened over 7 years where your housing costs rise 40%. I gotta go back and look at area median incomes. I don't think area median incomes have increased by 40% in that same period of time. So it's just a quick crunch on cost of living. Without more supply, people just don't have options. They get cost. We've seen this too, where the number of households that are burdened by their housing costs continue to rise. And then if just one thing happens, you lose your job, or you have a gap in employment, a relationship breakdown, where you've had 2 people paying the rent, now you have 1 person trying to get by, or if you have like some other type of crisis, it's a quick slope to falling into homelessness. And then we often see, even if someone became homeless today, and they were working, need to get back into housing, they don't have any place to stay, but to get back into an apartment, usually you need about $2,000 to $3,000 in cash on hand. So you've got to pay first month's rent, security deposit, you might have some past due bills like a utility bill, and then just move-in costs. So that's upfront just to get back in. And for some people who are living paycheck to paycheck, you just can't, you
Yeah,
can't come up with
that's,
that very quickly.
Definitely information we already have in the presentation, so thank you for that. Okay, so we were back on changes. Changes for 2024.
Yeah.
Are we moving on to subpopulations now?
Yeah, so I can move to subpopulation. So some of just the things I'll highlight, lack of affordable housing remains our #1 cause. We do see that job loss has been an increasing reported cause over previous years, which again just gets down to basic economics. And we are seeing an increase in people reporting mental health was a contributing factor. It doesn't have to be one of these, people could have picked multiple, but I think that's a concerning trend over time. The other part here is needs of the community. Overwhelmingly, people say that they're seeking assistance getting into housing. The other 2 here that are concerning is food and clothing services. As people are experiencing homelessness in all parts of the city and county, with most of our food and our clothing services being centralized downtown, if you're experiencing homelessness south or east of the city, you don't have access to those basic services.
When you say case management, maybe you said it, just, what does that mean again?
It's a broad overview, so usually that can mean help getting IDs, help getting enrolled in benefits, insurance, healthcare costs. One of the most common issues is that folks do not have identification, they've lost it, it's been displaced. And so case management usually means getting access to IDs, benefits, resources, enrolling in housing programs, different types of support.
Thank you.
So most people are saying, I need help.
Right.
Right. The final takeaways I'll get to, mental health challenges are becoming more common. The number of people who are reporting a disabling condition is increasing in our community. I do believe that that is related to more people having more elongated periods of homelessness. So it cites a growing need. The increased shelter space contributed to having less people on the streets that night in January, and more people were accessing shelter when it's available. And then the number one need is people experiencing homelessness, is housing. We'll just put one quick plug in, because we hear this every year. We did not have anybody who said that they were bused into our community. Some people come from other parts. 75% reported they were living in Tulsa before they became homeless. 82% were living in Oklahoma before they became homeless. And the number one trend that we see if somebody wasn't in the state of Oklahoma is that they were in a surrounding state, North Texas, Southern Kansas, Northwest Arkansas. So there's not a significant amount of inflow that comes. If there's anybody who wasn't in Tulsa specifically when they were experiencing homelessness, usually they'll come to our community because they had a social connection, or they might have needed a service, like a hospital service that brought them here temporarily, and then they weren't able to get back to their community, in a surrounding, maybe more rural area.
How many were from the surrounding area?
So I could get you the specific numbers of folks, but about 18% first experienced homelessness outside of the state of Oklahoma. I could get specifics. Most of those folks are from North Texas.
Yeah, no, the group before that, I'm sorry, to clarify, the surrounding area of Tulsa.
Oh, gotcha.
Like small towns, how many?
About 7%.
7, thank you. I missed that. Thank you.
That's it. And then the last part is we do have a new 5-year strategic plan to address homelessness. We've set some of our goals. You can see the high level here. The big focus that our big push is to get back up to rehousing levels like we were in 21 and 22. Our first goal is to rehouse 5,000 individuals over the last 5 years. Over the previous 5 years, we rehoused 4,200 individuals. So clearly we have to do more.
Thank you so much for your clarification on the busing issue, the rumor that never seems to die. I appreciate that. I do have a couple of questions. The minimum wage for the state of Oklahoma and evictions. What is the effect of the eviction? We're number 11 in the nation in Tulsa for the highest eviction rates. What is the primary reason for those evictions, would you know?
So more than 13,600 evictions were filed in Tulsa County last year.
13,600?
13,600 were filed in Tulsa County last year. The vast majority of those evictions are related to non-payment of rent. There are challenges of like how rapidly an eviction can be completed in less than 2 weeks. So before someone can even get their next paycheck and start on a payment plan and making up. With currently with the minimum wage being at $7.25, looking at what is affordable and what is an income for a household to be able to not pay more than 30% of their income towards housing at average rent, a household would need to be making $21.69 an hour to be able to actually be at a place where their housing costs aren't a burden on their income. So that's really, and that's for a 2-bedroom household, which is the average.
Well, that's really interesting, and I appreciate that information. A thought process that I had as well is the fact that once people get evictions on their record, they're inclined to stay on the street longer because that's already on their record, and so they're unable to find housing more rapidly. Is that?
So once an eviction's on your record, I mean, that's available on OSCN, and it's part of, many landlords will use that as part of their tenant search criteria, and so that can become a big barrier. Even if that eviction was later dismissed, even if the debt was settled, it's still something that essentially flags similar to a credit check. I think that's an issue at the state, and we have advocated pretty significantly that there should be automatic record sealings, especially in cases of dismissals, and after a certain period of time that those records should be sealed. We're continuing to advocate for that. But it does become a barrier that if someone has a previous eviction, they will frequently be denied when applying for housing. It's where it is really helpful to work with a nonprofit organization that builds relationships with landlords, and things like being able to offer rental assistance, so the landlord has an assurance the rent's gonna come every month. We see that be really successful. But an individual who's unhoused, on their own, it is very challenging to find a landlord who will work with them despite previous evictions or issues with their credit.
And then I have one more question, and I hand it over to the council. With the utility rates, and that is incorporating PSO, sewer, water, all of those other expenses that we're looking at going forth, I think it's 18-20% total combined aggregate, but if a person is unable to pay their utilities but still remain in a housing situation of sorts, how is that, how are we doing with that kind of population? Do
So
we?
not maintaining your electricity bill in some circumstances can be grounds for an eviction, because it
Right,
can be a
okay.
requirement of a
Right,
lease, so
okay.
that's a challenge too. So it is certainly, it depends on each situation, but I mean, I know personally for my lease, it's a requirement. So that can be a challenge as well, it's just adding to the costs.
Right, okay, all right. First, we have Counselor Dr. Wright. Anybody else?
Thank you. I always appreciate your work, and thanks to all the partners and volunteers who go out and do that pit count. It's not easy work, but it's so meaningful and important. Can we go back on the slide 5, I think, if I'm counting from the cover?
Is this one?
Sorry, 1, 2, 3. It's the one with the geography.
Oh, yes.
So just so I understand what's causing like the bloom, it's only the people that were counted this year, correct?
Correct.
So these are encampments, and I think, Emily, you explained yesterday what qualifies as an encampment. Can you just remind us what that is?
Yeah, well, I think, so this
Or
was
is this
taken
just-
from point in time, so it includes sheltered and unsheltered
Okay.
people, not just encampments.
Okay, but the sheltered people are the bright white green blob in the social services corridor, right?
Yes.
So that's where people are in congregate settings
And then the other, I mean, Mark can speak to this, but are folks who might be in individual sleeping situations or in encampments, both of them.
And I should point out that we do the count, the foot count, and we do it during the day. It's hard to find everybody at night, and one, it's pretty rude to wake somebody up if they're sleeping, so we do it during the day.
Yeah.
So it may not be at the location where they're sleeping. So some of these are definitely encampments. We go into encampments and do the count, but some of it just represents people moving around.
This is where you encountered them and did the survey.
Yeah.
So, obviously not going to hotels where we know a lot of people are staying, and not talking necessarily to people unless they're out that are sleeping in cars or couch surfing. So really, there's more people in housing insecure situations, because we're not, unless they're out doing something and you survey them and they say, oh, I'm sleeping in my car, we're not necessarily engaging with those folks. So I just wanted to illuminate that for folks, and get clarity. On slide 7, you have some statistical reporting that I wanted to ask some questions about. I think it's 2 after this. So Tulsa, the ones that are jumping out to me are the double-digit ones that have increased: sheltered, chronic, and youth. I know that's just click, click, click on the survey. Now, do you all do a deeper dive and find out why there's an 18% increase in youth, or like
Yes.
these bigger ones?
So the 11% increase in sheltered, we should note that that is because of the emergency
That's the
winter shelter.
emergency ones? Okay.
Yeah, so it's not actually, there hasn't been a significant increase in shelter capacity.
Okay.
The 19% in chronic, or homelessness, is related to individuals who have been experiencing homelessness for more than a year and are now developing disabilities.
I mean, that's a large, that's 1 in 5.
Yeah,
almost.
and the number of people who reported having a disabling condition in this count increased as opposed to last year. So we were at 55% of people surveyed reported a disabling condition. So that is part of the fact that it takes more than 200 days on average from when someone's placed on our housing wait list until a spot opens up. It really gets to this: there's one permanent supportive housing unit vacant for every 49 individuals experiencing chronic homelessness.
Well, and if they have a physical disability, that really limits them to certain types of housing. I just remember that when I was helping some neighbors, it's like a second-story apartment might have been available, they can't walk up to a second-story apartment, so that the people that have those other considerations, it really narrows down what their options could be. And,
Oh,
yeah,
Council,
go
I was
ahead.
just gonna add to that number on the chronic, what we were talking about yesterday was the unsheltered chronic number.
Okay, and then so for youth, do we know what's driving this 18%?
This one actually is an expansion of services. So,
Okay.
we have had 5 new programs that have started in the last year. Those programs are by Tulsa Day Center, Tulsa Dream Center, Black Queer Tulsa, Youth Services of Tulsa, and the Higher Education Consortium. So this number, folks, were increased in this count because we actually have additional capacity in transitional housing and emergency shelter programs in addition to rapid rehousing, permanent housing programs. So typically, youth and young adults we don't find in emergency shelters as often or experiencing street homelessness. They're there, but not at the same rate as the general adult population. Youth and young adults are more likely to be couch surfing. This program actually allows us to serve those folks. So
To count them?
To count them
Okay.
and to offer them housing assistance. So the count here is just because now youth and young adults have more options instead of couch surfing, that they can come into like a supportive program and environment that helps them get their own housing. And that's actually been, as I mentioned, we've housed more than 100 additional youth and young adults than we had in the previous year because of these expanded programs. And those programs only got started at the end of Q2 of last year. So that's only really with like 6 months of programs operating.
Yeah, and then the 1/3 experiencing domestic violence, is that pretty consistent, or is that going up?
Unfortunately, that's been very consistent.
Okay, and then, the mental health reporting out, do you think that's just because stigma has been lowered, or so people are more comfortable talking about it, or do you think that there's an increase in mental health need?
That one's really hard to say.
Okay.
Yeah, that one's really hard to say. I will say that in terms of our outreach providers, we have more organizations doing outreach that are more coordinated and are doing it really effectively. And so I think that part of like having relationships and honest conversations where some people might be cautious to share that in the past.
Yeah.
But it's really hard to say what could be driving that. It may be something for our mental health service providers to talk about
Yeah.
a little bit more in depth.
My final question is, out of the 1449 you encountered, do you know how many were holding vouchers?
I don't.
Okay, we don't ask that question.
No, we don't ask that question
Okay.
typically in the count. Unfortunately, because the Tulsa Housing Authority has been on a freeze with issuing
Yeah.
vouchers for several months, I doubt there was anyone who had it.
So that's my question with this 1040 statistic that you just shared. And I talked to Emily about this yesterday. The choice vouchers are frozen in their dollar amounts, but the people that do have them, I was asking the question if HUD had adjusted that rental rate that they'll provide for, because we have accelerated so fast on the market that a lot of people, have that voucher, but it only covers $800. And then there's all these rules about you can't backfill your 800 to get to 1040 with like a church helping you out or a friend, like that's against the rules. So it's not a today answer, but I would like to know, better understand, like we're hearing the crisis about the vouchers, but if we could, as a group, better understand the nuances of that, so that when we're out in community talking about, hey, would you consider taking vouchers on this development or something, we really understand what's going on. My understanding when we're talking about affordable housing, it's really from a pricing model, not a income qualification model, unless you're through the HUD system. So I don't know that everyone fully understands that nuance, but we need to be mindful when we're talking about, oh, so many more affordable units came on.
Right.
Affordable for who?
Yeah.
Right? So just as we start really digging into our strategy and activating these dollars to go get things either converted, renovated, and or stick built, I want to be doing these checkbacks because it's an ever-changing climate that we're trying to be responsive to. But I don't want us to get to the end. I hear Councilor Bingle say this a lot too, that we built all these things, but like he's sharing about a community that went up affordable, but they can't fill the units. And so I have to pause when I'm like, we're doing the thing that we said we needed to do, but still people aren't signing up to be there. What are the reasons for that? What are the barriers? So I think as we all learn about those in our community, we can look, because I don't know if it's like that voucher needs to be adjusted up so then people can get in, or.
If you know about affordable housing that needs folks to move in, I would love to talk.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's A with a capital A, so it might be priced $950 or $1,000.
Yeah, my understanding it is.
Okay.
AA.
Yeah.
Which is still below what we're seeing in average rent right now. So
Mhm.
this, you're getting to the challenge though of like where housing pricing is so important. So
Yeah.
the housing authority, and I won't speak for them, but my understanding is with continuing resolution, HUD generally had stable funds, but with rents rising across the country, that means they, in order to maintain being able to get access to units, the housing authorities typically ask to be able to increase what they're allowed to pay, which means they issue less vouchers, because they're
Yeah.
working from a budget.
Finite pot of money, yeah.
So it unfortunately, like, it gets paid, we have to pay the cost either way. We pay to have more affordable housing and keep costs lower, or we pay more for these supportive housing programs that people need and will be homeless without.
In the, really the area that we're in need the most of to meet the demand that we're seeing in this presentation is that deeply affordable.
And permanent supportive.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that 30% AMI.
And I would, just one last thing to point out here, talking about like long-term important, the number of individuals 55 and over was 23%. We see that
That's
growing.
true.
We consider 55 and over people who've been experiencing homelessness as senior citizens because life expectancy has decreased so much through experiences of homelessness that it's so hard on the body. I know typically we think 65 and over, but as we see an older population, just thinking about from our
Mark, stop
population.
using offensive terms.
I'm just thinking about the quality of health for our
I'm not taking
population
it
that we
personally,
serve.
I'm not
I'm
55.
joking.
But that's a population that, right, is gonna continue to need long-term supports.
Absolutely.
All righty.
Yes.
Counselor Archie.
Thank you for the presentation. It's always good to see you, Mark.
It's great to see you.
And Emily. So last week, Counselor Bellis brought forward we voted to allocate the $231,000 in ARPA for decommissioning of encampments and placement in hotels and things. How do you think that money's gonna affect these numbers? And obviously it's not enough, but do you think we're gonna experience a little blip of it going down? I mean, is that gonna be able to impact?
I mean, it depends on when those dollars come and when we do the count. I mean, $200,000 certainly helps. We will like decide on a final use, but we
Okay.
have existing programs that do things like rapid rehousing that provide anywhere from like 3 to 24 months of rental assistance and case management. And the goal for that program is that it's folks who, they're not chronically homeless, and that the intention is they can get enough income to be able to be sufficient on their own with some support. So $200,000, I think, plugged into a system of service providers that are already doing the work is really helpful. Like, we know we can rehouse almost 1,100 people in a year. It's really a resources issue, so I think that helps. And being able to target that to people who are living in encampments is really good. What we're seeing is we know people in encampments.
Sorry.
It's okay. There's a higher likelihood that a person has been chronically homeless, and so
Right.
we need to make sure we have long-term commitments of support there.
Right, because I think to myself, you start to use the 200,000 and, so we're not really quick. I would hate to see folks housed and then rental assistance dries up and then they are unhoused.
So that's part of our working relationship with Emily, is trying to figure out when funds come available, how can it be used? We also don't want to be in a situation where we put somebody into a program that's only going to last a year, and we know that they're going to need more than that. So if we have funding that is really time limited, we'll use it in a different way, or we'll try to plan for what's the bridge off here.
Yeah.
So that includes conversations with Tulsa Housing Authority or Oklahoma Housing Finance Agency about when vouchers might become available, and can we roll people into that? Obviously, Congress controls more of that than we do, but we do a lot of that game planning, essentially, of how can we use these dollars, have the best impact, but not like have somebody fall back into homelessness.
And Counselor, we've got some folks who have been matched to housing, but have no voucher, no way to initiate the expense, that are on the street right now. So that allocation, that $230 allows, as we go into decommission, okay, now we have this person that's been matched, but there is no voucher available to move them into housing.
Yeah, potentially, that $2,000 to $3,000, that could be a barrier. You know, maybe they have a full-time job, or maybe they're working lower wages, but they just need that little assistance to get into the house, or folks that need rental assistance to prevent them from slipping into homelessness. I'm thinking this 230 may not bring a lot of people out of homelessness, but it could prevent more people from falling into it while we figure out what we're doing with ILT, you know, these other funds.
And we're happy to think through, like, what's the best return on investment.
Yeah.
I think that what I would encourage the council, as opportunity and money falls or appears, to think of it two ways. When we have an opportunity, even if it's a time-limited funds, like, it will get put to good use and will get people into housing. So looking for those opportunities to help the homeless response system get to the capacity it needs, that's really helpful. But while we also make long-term investments, because quite frankly, like where Tulsa is at in our ability to rehouse people, we're still significantly behind other comparable cities. And so we are trying to long-term build the resources that have the services that, and the housing that we really need. So we can do both, and we need to do both.
Thank you.
Counselor Bengel?
I just have a quick question. The 46% case management that you talked about, and you talked about like IDs and, you know, potential qualification for disability. What is the partnership like with the agencies, like the state, if you have to have a birth certificate? Because I think you have to pay a fee, and then it takes, what, 2-3 weeks to get that birth certificate back. Is there that partnership with the state to help alleviate some of the wait times to get through these processes?
So there's not I mean, we pay for like ID cards all the time, so there's still fees that are related to that. That would be helpful. It's a small thing. I think a prioritization of those types of IDs would be really helpful. One of the biggest challenges that we have is in order to get a government issue ID, you have to have a birth certificate.
Right.
You need to get a birth certificate, you need a government issue ID. I'll just, not to throw too many rocks, it's really hard to work through the Social Security Administration right now if somebody needs a Social Security card, and that can be contingent too. So you need to have one of those to get the other 2 or 3, but like if you've lost all of them. So I think that's an opportunity where if we could do more access, reduce fees, prioritization would be really helpful. And it is easier if someone was born in the city of Tulsa to get a birth certificate. If somebody was born in a surrounding area, that can be more challenging.
Right, so that was kind of what I was looking at. If 46% of your numbers are in case management, what is the high bar of that? That's the challenge.
The IDs is definitely a consistent challenge. And then the other part is like we can help someone get an ID, and then if their items are stolen, they may need to get a new one again. And so that, that's just part of it. But even like getting someone an ID so that they can access, if they have an ID and they're eligible for Social Security, then we get that process moving. So, but I will say, the city of Tulsa and like birth certificates is usually not a huge issue. But like working to get state IDs and the Social Security Administration, that's more challenging.
And Counselor Dr. Wright and Counselor Lakin, since you guys were on that 3H task force, did we not talk about like a repository for documents for homeless folks at one time?
Yep.
Does that exist?
Not yet.
Okay, because I thought we had discussed that
I mean, if we had a
previously.
drop-in center where people could drop in and connect to services and store their things, that would be awesome, but you heard the BOA went on for 5 hours last night, so still an ongoing conversation of how we get to the solutions in places and spaces. You see the blue map, right? We're not gonna put it out at 101st and Sheridan. We're not seeing unsheltered folks out there. We do see some apartments out there, but we need to have these kind of repositories, storage places, in places where people can then get back to them. And I think as we talk about encampment decommissioning, we're gonna have to talk about like how that piece of getting all the paperwork, because you hear this revolving door of our providers, it's very expensive to go through that process, and very disheartening for the caseworkers to have gone through that process and walked with somebody, and then 3 months later, they're re-encountering them, and it's like,
I lost my dog.
I don't have my documents again. So I don't know legally if we could scan things and have it digitized. I mean, there's gotta be some solutions out there.
But do those even serve as official copies?
Well, exactly.
Yeah, there's a And our population
It just depends.
might struggle to get access to a digital copy, so if there's duplicate physical copies that are safe stored, and that could be with a service, many of our, like, day center services, like talking like the Merchant or Tulsa Day Center, Denver House, they accept mail, they operate as an address, and so that's a trusted place for things to be stored if it's available, so those are things that can help.
I mean, I'm thinking too, like, if I could keep, I do keep, like, my car insurance, my certain documents in my phone that count. So then the physical documents can be stored safely. I mean, maybe with some of the unsheltered folks that have phones, like, they can have some of that stuff in their phone, but they have a trusted community partner holding the.
What has also helped too with this issue of I don't have any IDs, but I need one to get one, is having some other form of ID that can do this. So libraries have done sort of IDs that are then accepted as like an official government document that can get you started. I've seen law enforcement agencies that have done like what's called like a hot ID. So cities and counties can issue sort of what, like an ID that is a government ID for a homeless individual that is then accepted by is accepted as part of the step to get those other documents. It's really helpful. So there are some examples out there of like a homeless identification that is considered a government document that really doesn't give you much more than like a picture, name, and identification, but can help you speed up the
It
process.
unlocks the process.
The birth certificate and
Yes.
then the other forms of IDs.
So, anybody else before I?
Just on that, is that a state statute?
I'm not sure. It depends. I think some states have passed laws related to like lowering ID barriers or doing, there have been proposals. I know just from my advocacy work previously in Texas that was something that we worked on. I do think that there can be some local levels. I mean, if like the city of Tulsa could accept some other form of identification for birth certificates, would that help speed up that process? That would be a big help. Even just for city of Tulsa, people who have a birth certificate from the city of Tulsa, if there's some other type of ID that could help move that along, and if they can get their birth certificate from the city of Tulsa, they could get everything else. It wouldn't solve the full problem, but that would help a lot.
Well, it would have to be Tulsa County. I don't think we issue birth certificates, but I understand what you're saying.
Gotcha.
Might be something for us to look in from a policy standpoint.
Okay, I did have a couple questions in regards to the youth counts. So basically, we did not have adequate data until there were resources put into play. Is that correct?
Because youth and young adults are much more often, this 18 to 24 range are more likely to couch surf or double up, especially couch surfing,
Right.
that we have been able to count more now that we have more services. When we opened up more assistance program, we saw a lot more young people who had been struggling, that there just wasn't any help for them, started seeking services.
Do we have any data in regards to the 2S LGBTQIA community and the youth being unsheltered?
I can find that data. HUD has removed some of the gender identification requirements, but I
course.
can find data for you.
Okay, yeah, that would be interesting. Alrighty, and I just wanted to also say that the Rose Bowl is in District 3, my district, so repping District 3. And they served the unsheltered for 2-3 years now, and they have been really amazing. I also want to give a shout out to District 2, as apparently District 2 and District 3 are the main winter weather availability shelters. And here we have a total of 9 district councils, and we're talking 2 that actually are able to provide. I also just want to say one last thing, that the veterans number is concerning to me. And I'm concerned in that we're working on an ordinance, an anti-discrimination ordinance, that would increase their ability to not be discriminated against for services, as well as the 2S LGBTQIA community. And I just want to also give a shout out to the Black Queer Tulsa group that is helping with this, because it is a human right issue. So I appreciate it. Anybody else have any further comments? All righty.
I would just say that there is a Oklahoma Mobile ID app. So is that used? Can that be used, or is that just driver's license?
I'll have to double check on that one. I don't think it's very accessible for the folks that we work with. And it's difficult sometimes when getting IDs, is like, can a third party help you, or do you have to do it directly? And so, I mean, half of, like, what an outreach worker or caseworker is doing is helping people get to appointments to get these documents.
Yeah, I just can't tell if you can upload other IDs. You can apply for a real ID through the app. You can, I mean, it just pulled all my
You have
driver's
to have a
license
birth
information
certificate.
up.
For a real ID.
Or a
You have to have
passport.
an original, official embossed birth certificate.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there are other forms of ID that can be uploaded to this, so that at least you have an ID, and then you can
Mhm.
share it with other parties from your phone, if a phone is available, and
Mhm.
if that's something that they
That
typically
state
carry.
sponsored, it was just driver's license
Was it? Yeah,
initially, unless they've changed it.
yep, okay,
Even if we could just make it state ID, not a driver's license, that'd be helpful.
yeah.
Alrighty.
Well, Counselor Bush knows how to get stuff done at the Capitol, that's why we're having this little chat.
Well, I appreciate everything that you're doing for the Tulsa community, Mark, as well as you, Emily. Thank you so much for the presentation and giving us some insight as to data, real data and numbers,
Yeah,
so.
thank you for having us. We love spending our afternoons at City Hall.
Mhm.
4 hours, 3 hours, whatever it will be.
Well,
We're happy
apparently
to
we
come.
do too.
Thank you.
Alrighty.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 9, we are adjourned.
Thank you.